Father discovers his black daughter weeping in school toilet, dials 911 after hearing her story. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's emotional and eye-opening story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. We're always bringing you real, powerful stories that remind us just how important it is to stand up and protect the ones we love. Also, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let us know what country you're tuning in from. It's always amazing to see how far these stories reach and connect us all across the world. Now let's get into this. Have you ever wondered what it's like to be a parent, trusting that your child is safe in the hands of a school? A place where they're supposed to feel protected, where their only focus should be learning and making friends. You send them off each morning, hoping they come home with stories of laughter and new experiences. But what if, without you even knowing, they're silently battling something far darker? Today's story is a powerful reminder of how easily something like that can slip under the radar, how a child can carry the weight of an unspoken burden for far too long, and how one father's unwavering love for his daughter led him to take drastic action to protect her. This story is about Sophia, a 13-year-old girl, and her dad, Marcus, a father who, like so many parents, assumed his daughter was doing okay, until one day he found her crying alone in a school toilet, and his entire world turned upside down. Now, before we get into the full story, don't forget to like this video if you find it compelling, and subscribe to the channel if you're interested in hearing more stories that touch the heart, inspire, and remind us just how much of a difference standing up can make. But back to Sophia's story. It all started on what seemed like an ordinary school day. One of those days where everything feels routine, where nothing seems out of place. You know, the kind of day where parents drop their kids off, maybe give them a kiss goodbye, and then get on with the hustle and bustle of life. Marcus had done just that. He dropped Sophia off like always, expecting her to have a normal day. But Sophia's day was anything but normal. As the hours passed, Marcus started to get that gnawing feeling in his gut. You know the one, when something just doesn't feel right. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he knew something was off when Sophia didn't call him after school. She was always quick to let him know when she was headed home or had an after-school activity. Not today. At first, he told himself it was nothing. Maybe she was busy with friends or had a club meeting. Maybe her phone died. But as time ticked on and there was still no word from her, his fatherly instincts kicked into high gear. By the time he arrived at her school, Marcus was in full-blown panic mode. He searched the parking lot, the hallways, asking staff if they'd seen his daughter. No one seemed to know where she was. His heart raced faster and faster as his worst fears began to creep into his mind. Finally, he found her. She wasn't in class. She wasn't with friends. She wasn't even outside waiting for him like she usually did. No, Marcus found his little girl curled up on the floor of a school toilet. She looked small, fragile, and heartbroken, her face streaked with tears that had been falling for who knows how long. For a moment, he could hardly breathe. The sight of his daughter, his baby, looking so broken was something no parent is ever prepared for. He rushed over to her, dropping to his knees, desperately trying to understand what was going on. "Sophia?" he asked softly, his voice full of worry. "Baby girl, what's wrong? Talk to me." But she didn't answer right away. She just shook her head, trying to hide her face from him. The tears kept coming, though, and Marcus, he wasn't going to let it slide. He wasn't leaving that toilet until he knew what had hurt her so deeply. "Sophia, please," he said again, his voice trembling now. "Tell me what happened." And then, after what felt like an eternity, she finally spoke. But when she did, her words hit him harder than he could have ever imagined. "I can't do this anymore, Daddy," she whispered. Those words stopped him cold. Imagine hearing your child say that. Every protective instinct in Marcus roared to life in that moment, but he knew he had to stay calm for her. He couldn't break down, not when she needed him. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" he asked, barely keeping his voice steady. "What's going on?" Sophia sat there, still hugging her knees to her chest, trying to keep herself from falling apart. She had been carrying so much pain for so long, but today it was just too much for her to handle. And finally, she told him the truth. "They hate me," she whispered, her voice cracking with each word. They make fun of me because I'm black. Marcus felt his heart break into 1,000 pieces right there. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of what she was telling him. She had been enduring racial bullying day after day without him ever knowing. Now think about that for a second. Imagine your own child enduring this kind of cruelty every single day and never saying a word about it because they didn't want to worry you. That's what Sophia had been doing. She had been shouldering this nightmare, keeping it inside because she didn't want to burden her father with her pain. Marcus was stunned, devastated, and furious all at once. How had this happened? How had the school let this go on without anyone stepping in to help her? He pulled Sophia into his arms, holding her as tightly as he could, as if that alone could protect her from the hurt she had been experiencing. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered, his voice full of sorrow. "I didn't want to make things worse," she said softly, her words barely audible. "I thought I could handle it." But she couldn't. No one could, especially not a 13-year-old girl being made to feel like she didn't belong because of the color of her skin. And right then, Marcus knew one thing for certain: this had to stop. Now. He stood up, his hands shaking from the anger he was trying to contain. He couldn't believe the school had allowed this to happen. He wasn't going to leave this to chance anymore. His daughter needed him, and it was time for action. Without saying a word, Marcus pulled out his phone. Sophia watched, confused. "Dad, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice still weak. But Marcus didn't answer. He dialed 911. "911, what's your emergency?" Without hesitation, Marcus said what he had to say. "I'm calling to report racial harassment and bullying at my daughter's school. It's been going on for months, and nothing's been done to stop it." The operator on the other end was probably caught off guard. This wasn't your usual emergency. But to Marcus, this was an emergency. His daughter was in pain, and that made it urgent. Minutes later, a police officer arrived at the school. Officer Davis, a no-nonsense kind of woman, came in with a look that said she wasn't here to play games. Marcus, Sophia, and Officer Davis marched straight to the principal's office, ready to make sure this would never happen again. Behind his desk sat Mr. Thompson, the school principal, looking calm and collected like this was just another issue to sweep under the rug. He probably thought it was no big deal that Marcus was overreacting. "Mr. Turner, I understand you're upset, but calling the police seems a little extreme, don't you think? These are just kids," but Marcus wasn't going to let him finish. "Don't you dare minimize this," he snapped. His voice shook with anger. "These aren't just kids being kids. My daughter has been tormented for months because she's black, and you've done nothing to stop it." Sophia sat next to him, her eyes fixed on the floor, but nodding along silently. She had tried to tell teachers, tried to explain what was happening, but they had brushed her off. They told her to be strong, that it wasn't a big deal. But it was. Officer Davis, standing tall beside them, looked directly at the principal, her voice sharp and steady. "Racial harassment is no small issue. If this school hasn't taken steps to protect Sophia, further legal action will be taken." Suddenly, the principal wasn't looking so calm anymore. As Marcus stood there, his heart racing, he couldn't help but feel a mixture of anger and sadness. The moment Sophia had shared her pain, it felt like the ground had been pulled from beneath him. The weight of her struggles was heavy, and he knew that they needed to confront this situation head-on. Officer Davis remained beside them, her presence a steady source of support. "Marcus, I want you to know that we're going to take this seriously," she said firmly. "Bullying of any kind, especially racial harassment, cannot be tolerated. I will ensure that this is addressed." Mr. Thompson, the principal, finally appeared to register the gravity of the situation. "We take these matters very seriously, but I need to understand the specifics. Can you provide me with details, Sophia?" For a moment, Sophia hesitated. The idea of speaking up again after feeling so ignored was daunting, but she looked at her father and felt a surge of courage. She took a deep breath, wiping her eyes, and began to recount the incidents. How the girls at school had made fun of her hair, how they called her names, and how they isolated her during lunch. As she spoke, Marcus felt pride swell within him. His daughter was not just a victim. She was a fighter. She had found her voice in the midst of despair. Officer Davis took notes, nodding encouragingly, while Mr. Thompson listened intently, his expression shifting from defensive to concerned. "Thank you for sharing that with us, Sophia," he said, his voice now softer. "I'm truly sorry to hear what you've been going through. We need to take immediate action to address this and ensure your safety at school." Marcus felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could turn this painful experience into something that could help not only Sophia, but others who were suffering in silence. Once the meeting concluded, Marcus and Sophia left the office together, hand in hand. The weight of the world was still on their shoulders, but there was a newfound sense of solidarity between them. "I'm so proud of you, Sophia," Marcus said, his voice filled with warmth. "You're so brave." Sophia managed a small smile. "I just want to feel safe, Dad. I want to go to school and not worry about what people think of me." "We'll make sure of it," he replied, squeezing her hand. "This isn't over yet." Story. Days turned into weeks, and changes began to take shape at the school. With the involvement of Officer Davis and the district's administration, anti-bullying campaigns were introduced. They held assemblies that encouraged students to speak out and embrace differences, focusing on respect and inclusion. Marcus and Sophia attended every meeting, advocating for policies that would create a safer environment for all students, regardless of their background. It wasn't an easy journey. There were moments of frustration, setbacks, and times when Sophia still felt the weight of her experiences. But each day she grew a little stronger, bolstered by her father's unwavering support. They began to form a community of allies, parents, students, and teachers who believed in change. One day, as Sophia walked down the hall, she noticed a group of girls standing together, whispering and pointing. Her heart raced, and for a moment, she felt that familiar knot of anxiety. But instead of retreating, she stood tall, remembering her father's words, "You are not alone, and your voice matters." As she passed by, one girl called out, "Why don't you just go back to where you came from?" The hurtful words hung in the air, but instead of looking down, Sophia turned around. "You know, I'm proud of who I am, and I won't let your words bring me down," she replied, her voice steady. The other girls were taken aback, and for a moment, silence enveloped them. Then, to Sophia's surprise, one girl stepped forward, her expression softening. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that. I want to do better." The confrontation didn't end with anger, it sparked a conversation. A conversation that made them realize that everyone carries their own burdens and that understanding each other could lead to healing. Sophia walked away feeling lighter. It wasn't just about standing up for herself. It was about fostering dialogue and empathy. That evening, Marcus found Sophia sitting at the kitchen table, her homework spread out before her. She was smiling as she wrote. "What's got you so happy?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "I think things are starting to change, Dad," she replied. "At school, I made a new friend today. We talked about how we can make our school better." Marcus's heart swelled with pride. "That's amazing, Sophia. I knew you had it in you." As the weeks passed, the atmosphere in the school shifted. The campaigns made an impact, and students began to engage in meaningful conversations about diversity and respect. Sophia found her place, not just as a student, but as a leader, inspiring her peers to stand together against bullying. And through it all, Marcus remained her biggest supporter, cheering her on from the sidelines. He watched his daughter transform from a girl burdened by fear into a confident young woman who was unafraid to speak her truth. One day, while attending a school assembly, Sophia took the stage to share her story. As she spoke about her journey, her struggles, her fears, and her triumphs, Marcus felt tears well up in his eyes. She was a beacon of hope, showing others that it's okay to be different and that standing up for oneself is a powerful act. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Sophia looked out into the crowd, her heart racing with a mix of pride and gratitude. She had turned her pain into purpose, and in doing so, she inspired those around her to take action. As she stepped off the stage, Marcus enveloped her in a warm embrace. "You did it, baby girl. I'm so proud of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Sophia smiled brightly, knowing that her journey was just beginning. Together they had sparked change, and it was a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the importance of speaking up. And as they left the school that day, hand in hand, Both father and daughter knew that they had not only transformed their own lives, but had also lit the way for others to follow.